Marcus Thompson tightened his grip on the worn leather wallet in his jacket pocket. Inside was $15,000 in cash, every cent he had managed to save after selling his car, his tools, and even their tiny family home. That money was his daughter Maya's only chance. 8 years old and fragile as glass, she needed heart surgery in New York. Without it, time was running out. As the boarding call for Flight 2847 echoed through the terminal, Maya tugged his sleeve. "Papa," she whispered, her voice thin but sweet, "after my surgery, can we go back to the park? I want to ride the swings again." Marcus smiled through the ache in his chest. "Of course, sunshine. We'll go every day if you want." They walked down the narrow aisle to their seats in economy. Marcus lifted Maya gently into her seat by the window. She clutched her stuffed teddy bear, its fur worn smooth from years of being hugged through doctor visits and long nights. To her, it was comfort. To Marcus, it was a reminder of how fragile her childhood had been. As the plane climbed into the sky, Marcus exhaled slowly. Every mile brought them closer to hope. He closed his eyes, silently praying for strength. Then, chaos. A sharp cry erupted from the first-class cabin. Flight attendants rushed forward. Passengers craned their necks. "We need help." Someone collapsed. A flight attendant shouted. Instinct surged through Marcus before he could think. He glanced at Maya, who nodded faintly as if to say, "Go, Papa." Without hesitation, he unbuckled and ran toward first class. A woman lay crumpled in the aisle, her face pale, lips bluish. Marcus dropped to his knees. "I'm a paramedic," he announced firmly, already checking her pulse. Weak, shallow. "Get me oxygen," he ordered. His hands moved with precision, airway open, compression steady. The cabin was silent except for his urgent commands and the rhythmic thump of CPR. Sweat lined his forehead, but he didn't stop. After agonizing moments, the woman gasped, her chest rising as color slowly returned to her face. Passengers broke into applause, relief flooding the cabin. The flight attendant handed Marcus a towel. "Sir, you just saved her life." Marcus shook his head. "Just doing what I had to." The woman's eyes fluttered open. She was striking, even disheveled. Blonde hair, tailored suit, a presence of authority even in weakness. She gripped his hand and whispered, "Thank you, you saved me." Marcus gave a small nod, but his heart was already back with Maya. He returned to economy, where she sat wide-eyed, teddy bear clutched to her chest. "You're my hero, Papa," she whispered. Marcus smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her forehead. He had no idea the woman he had saved was Victoria Sterling, a powerful CEO. And he had no idea that this single act of compassion, 37,000 feet above the earth, would alter the course of his daughter's life forever. Victoria Sterling stirred as the oxygen mask was lifted from her face. Her chest still rose in uneven breaths, but the world had stopped spinning. Blinking, she focused on the man kneeling beside her, a tall, broad-shouldered figure with tired eyes. "You saved me," she murmured, her voice raspy but steady. Marcus shook his head modestly. "Just did what was needed. Rest now." The flight attendants hovered, offering water and fussing, but Victoria waved them away. Instead, she studied the man. His clothes were simple, his shoes scuffed, yet his hands were steady and capable, his voice calm. A professional, a caregiver. Something about him tugged at a memory buried deep within her. Marcus returned to his economy seat, sliding back beside his daughter. Maya reached for his hand, her tiny fingers curling around his rough palm. "You're amazing, Papa," she whispered, her eyes glowing with pride. He chuckled softly. "I just did my job, sweetheart." But inside, a shadow of worry lingered. Every minute counted for Maya's surgery. He didn't have time for detours, no matter who he had saved. From her first-class seat, Victoria kept glancing back. She noticed the frail girl in the window seat, her pallor, the way she leaned heavily on her father's shoulder. Something inside Victoria twisted. She had once seen a child like that, her own son, pale and fragile, struggling for each breath in a pediatric ICU. The flash of memory was so vivid she nearly gasped. A small boy's hand, clammy in hers. Machines beeping in relentless rhythm. And beside her bed, a nurse with kind eyes and an unshakable presence. That nurse had promised her something in her darkest hour. "You won't face this grief alone. When I can, I will pass on the light. That nurse's name was Sarah Thompson. Victoria's fingers trembled as she reached into her handbag. She still carried the folded scrap of paper Sarah had pressed into her palm the night her son died. A name, a number she had long since lost track of. Marcus Thompson. Her eyes widened. Could it be possible? Could this man, the man who had just saved her life midair, be Sarah's husband? The cabin lights dimmed as passengers settled in for the long flight. But Victoria couldn't close her eyes. She kept turning back, her gaze fixed on Marcus and the sleeping child beside him. Maya's teddy bear slipped from her lap, rolling into the aisle. Victoria leaned down, picked it up gently, and approached their row. Here, she said softly, handing it back. Maya stirred and gave a sleepy smile. Thank you, she whispered. Marcus nodded politely, but Victoria lingered for a moment. Her throat tightened. Now that she was close, she saw it clearly, the resemblance. Maya's delicate features, the same warmth in her eyes as Sarah once had. Victoria's heart pounded. This wasn't coincidence. This was fate. She sank back into her seat, gripping the armrest. At 37,000 feet, a promise from the past had just collided with the present. And Victoria knew. She could not let this family slip away again. Victoria couldn't shake the memories that haunted her as the plane sped through the night. Every glance at Maya was like looking through a window into the past. She closed her eyes, and suddenly she was back in that hospital room. Her son, Ethan, had been just 7 when his body could no longer fight. Machines beeped faintly as she clung to his hand, whispering lullabies he could barely hear. Grief had already begun to hollow her chest even before his final breath. But she hadn't been alone. Nurse Sarah Thompson had stayed by her side. Young, warm, with a quiet strength, Sarah had never left the room. She'd held Victoria's trembling shoulders when Ethan slipped away, whispering words that carved themselves into Victoria's soul. Pain like this is unbearable, but love doesn't die here. One day, when you can, pass it forward. That's how light survives the darkness. Sarah had pressed a small paper into Victoria's hand. My husband's name is Marcus. If you ever need someone who understands, find him. Then Ethan was gone, and Victoria's world collapsed. For years, she had searched in silence, wanting to honor Sarah's words. She hired investigators, donated to pediatric wards, even funded research in Ethan's memory. Yet Marcus Thompson had remained a ghost. Until tonight, the realization hit her like a tidal wave. Fate hadn't just crossed paths. Fate had engineered this meeting. Victoria leaned back, her hand pressed to her chest where Marcus's strong hands had restarted her heart. A life for a life. A circle closing. By the time Flight 2847 landed in New York, Marcus's focus was razor sharp. He barely noticed the luxury cars waiting outside or the curious glances from first-class passengers. All that mattered was Maya. The hospital smelled of antiseptic and fear. Marcus clutched Maya's hand as doctors reviewed her file. The cardiologist's words were blunt. We need the payment in full before we can schedule surgery. Marcus's heart sank. He handed over the envelope of cash. The nurse frowned. This isn't enough for the initial procedure, Mr. Thompson. Helplessness crushed him. Years of saving, of sacrifice, and it still wasn't enough. He pressed his forehead against Maya's, whispering, I'll find a way, sunshine. I promise. That night, as Marcus sat in the waiting area with his head in his hands, a shadow fell across him. He looked up to see Victoria Sterling, flawless even in fatigue, her gaze steady. I know your struggle, she said quietly. And I can help. Marcus stiffened. With respect, ma'am, we don't need charity. Victoria sat down beside him. This isn't charity, it's a promise. Your wife once saved me in my darkest hour. Now, I intend to keep her words alive. Marcus's throat tightened. He had no idea how this woman knew Sarah, but something in her eyes, earnest, almost pleading, made him pause. The days that followed tested Marcus's pride like never before. Every fiber of his being wanted to say no, to refuse help, to stand on his own feet. But each time he saw Maya pale and breathless, each time her small hand trembled in his, he knew this battle wasn't about pride. It was about survival. He agreed. Victoria personally arranged the surgery, bringing in one of the country's top pediatric cardiac surgeons. She covered every bill without blinking, quietly ensuring Marcus kept his dignity. The night before surgery, Marcus sat by Maya's bed, whispering a bedtime story she was too tired to follow. When she finally drifted to sleep, Victoria entered quietly. "She reminds me of Ethan," she whispered. Marcus looked up, confused. "My son. He didn't survive. Your wife was there. She gave me the strength to face it." Marcus's eyes burned. He reached for her hand. Sarah had that gift. She believed every kindness lived on. The next morning, Marcus watched his daughter wheeled into surgery. Hours dragged like years. He paced the sterile hallway until his legs ached, his lips moving in silent prayer. At last, the surgeon emerged. She made it through. The surgery was a success. Marcus's knees buckled with relief. Tears he hadn't shed in years poured freely as he whispered, "Thank you, thank you." Victoria stood beside him, her hand firm on his shoulder. For the first time in years, peace touched her heart too. Spring sunlight streamed through the hospital window. Maya, cheeks rosy for the first time in years, laughed as she colored in her sketchbook. Marcus watched her, gratitude etched into every line of his face. Victoria entered quietly. This time, she wasn't the untouchable CEO, but simply a woman carrying scars of love and loss. She handed Maya a small wrapped gift. Inside was a silver locket with a tiny engraving, "Hope is stronger than fear." Maya beamed, slipping it around her neck. "Thank you." Later, Marcus walked Victoria to the hospital garden. "I don't know how to repay you," he said, voice thick with emotion. "You already have," she replied softly. "Your wife saved me once. You saved me again on that plane. This wasn't chance, Marcus. It was destiny." He swallowed hard, words failing him. As weeks passed, Maya grew stronger, her laughter echoing through hospital corridors, then finally into the world outside. On her first trip to the park after recovery, Marcus pushed her gently on the swing, the same one she had dreamed of. Her giggles filled the air like music. From a distance, Victoria watched, her eyes shining with tears. She felt Ethan's presence in the wind, Sarah's promise in her heart, and for the first time in years, she wasn't weighed down by grief. Marcus looked over, their eyes meeting. No words were spoken, yet everything was understood.